Good evening, everyone. We're here to continue with our study of In Divine Friendship, and we're in the last few sections of the book, but it'll take us a few weeks to get there. And Keshava was freed up from his other responsibilities on Tuesday night, so we have the pleasure of his chanting. So let's start with a prayer, and then we'll have a couple of chants and a little meditation before we begin. Heavenly Father, Divine Mother, Friend, beloved God, Jesus Christ, Babaji Krishna, Lahiri Mahashaya, Swami Sri Yukteswar, beloved Master Paramhansa Yogananda, saints of all religions, dear friend and guide Swami Kriyananda, humbly we bow to you all. We are so grateful for your presence in our lives. We have a single prayer. Make us receptive. Help us to hear your inner guidance and give us the clarity and the courage to go forward in accordance with thy will. We were born for one purpose, which is to draw closer to thee. Help us to make this incarnation a divine success. Om. Peace. Amen.
Dark and my stars are Devotees may come, devotees may go, devotees may come, devotees may go, but I will be thine always, my Lord, I will be thine always. When I die, look into mine eyes. When I die, look into mine eyes. They will usually say, I will be thine always, my Lord, I will be thine always. I may go far, farther than the stars. I may go far, farther than the stars, but I will be thine always, my Lord, I will be thine always. Devotees may come, devotees may go, devotees may come, devotees may go, but I will be thine always, my Lord, I will be thine always. When I
Okay, my friends. So we are in the last letter of the section of this book called World Conditions. And this last letter is Swamiji responding to a journalist or a radio announcer, radio interviewer, who wanted him to talk about certain issues. And we got almost to the end of it, but we just didn't quite have time. It's the end of this letter and the end of the section. So Swamiji has already talked about, it was a talk show host who wanted him. Swami answered the question, what is the appropriate way to respond to our aggressors? This is September 13th, 2002. So it was the first anniversary of the 9/11 attacks on the World Trade Center. So this is like revisiting that issue. This talk show host asking Swamiji his point of view. And he also said that he didn't want to go on the program because he didn't want to argue about these things. He felt they were just not subjects for argument. He has deeply held convictions, he'll express them. He doesn't want to try to argue and persuade someone. So the first one was how to respond to our aggressors, and we already read that. The second one was on the principle of nonviolence. So the third question was, how do we create peace? And Swami's answer is one line, 2 sentences. Work for peace. Don't work against violence. It's just like, that's really the whole thing. Swamiji says, if your goal is to create peace, you have to create a peaceful vibration while you're doing it. If you yourself are fighting and aggressive, and you say your goal is peace, he said it's never going to bring about peace because you're not emanating peace. And in the same context, I've told this story before, so I'll just remind you of it, when the people who were campaigning for a nuclear-free world, and there was an initiative on the California ballot having to do with, standing up against the proliferation of nuclear weapons. And they gave a presentation trying to win Swami's support and all of Ananda's support, which was all based on the horrific things that would happen to everyone if nuclear bombs were dropped. And Swami's comment afterwards is, war is created by aggressive people who are filled with fear often, and they're trying to get power over other people. He said, if your goal is peace, fear is a very bad tactic. Because in the end, what you will create is more fear rather than the actual peaceful vibration. So work for peace. Don't work against violence. Now you have to think that one through a little more, but I'll just leave it there. So the question is about leadership style and philosophy of leadership. Swami answers in one paragraph. History teaches the need to learn cooperation, not competition and violence. Again, he says we should work for the good and not against evil. The evil will always be there. We aren't going to eradicate it, but we can strengthen the side of good. Leadership that seeks to advance a cause, not a person, is what is needed today. Well, there's a lot in this. This was 20 years ago. Leadership that seeks to advance a cause, not a person. In other words, what Swami is saying, regardless of what you paste over it, a person's real motives and a group's real intentions will simply reveal themselves. Politicians nowadays, they don't think anything of just changing their point of view as soon as the polls change. When Abraham Lincoln was president, I'm told, I read, occasionally there would be opinion polls to find out what the populace thought, but Lincoln would never change his policy according to other people's opinions. He knew what his policies were, he knew what his principles were, he knew what it was that he was, had been literally born to present, and if people didn't understand what he was trying to do, then he just had to work harder to help them to understand. He didn't think that he should then surrender his principles for popularity. Now, of course, such integrity of position is quite frankly, almost unheard of. People just play the edge of power and how to keep it for themselves. But at the same time, there is a lot of shadow in the world, and this is what Swami is saying. The evil will always be there. We aren't going to be able to eradicate it. Now, he doesn't bother to explain it, but it's the cosmic drama. And often I've referred to the Yugas. In this particular stage in the Yuga cycle, there is a certain balance of light and darkness. And fortunately, we are moving where there's going to be a gradual increase of light. But that doesn't mean that darkness will be eradicated, because it's a dual universe. The material world itself depends on duality. So our job is to try to create good. Oftentimes people work so hard to eradicate evil. I was talking to a friend and about a mutual friend, and they have the leisure and the capacity to get involved in trying to help the world. But interestingly, all the causes the person has taken up are things that they can be angry about. So really there's like an angry temperament, and now it's angry at this abuse and it's angry at that abuse. And thank God, you know, there are people working for that kind of change. But far better if we're working for the good. Because otherwise the vibrations we put out are vibrations of my will dominating yours. And perhaps it's a slightly more elevated level. It might be even a massively more elevated level. But the idea of one willpower dominating another willpower is what we're struggling with. What we need to be working for is principles. And always have a clear idea of the principles that we're working for, not just the evil that we're trying to push back. In the process of working for those principles, we may increase the light, and the brighter the light, the farther away the shadow is pushed. And I always think of it as a shadow, because the shadow is something that blocks the light. The light is always present, but if we increase the brightness of the light, then the shadow gets pushed farther to the side. So Swami's now the last, an advice for world leaders. This is the last one. So Swami starts, I would say what I just said, that there is no way we can eradicate terrorism, because this is the anniversary of 9/11. If God hasn't been able to do it, I don't see how man can hope to. It's just a very interesting way to put it, isn't it? God has all the power in the world and the terrorists still exist. So there is some divine force here. If God hasn't been able to do it, I don't see how man can hope to. He, however, who created this world, surely knows how to run it. So we get into very interesting questions of philosophy, don't we? Terrorists, like everyone else, have lessons to learn. In their case, they need to learn to respect others' point of view, other points of view from their own, and to learn that they cannot force others to think just the way they themselves think. We too must reach that understanding. Now, don't mistake this to mean that, oh, well, the terrorists have a right to have their point of view, and who are we to say that they're wrong? They're clearly wrong. There are moral values in the world. There are divine principles that have to be maintained. But the question is not whether or not there are values to be maintained. It's the question of what is the most effective way to live by those values. And you know, this business about terrorists also have lessons to learn. I've been thinking about that a lot at this particular juncture in planet Earth. It's that, and these are magnificent principles that we have to be willing to look straight at. Every soul is equally dear to God. This is something that Swami put into our Festival of Light. We say it every week. You know, God is the same with all of us. He doesn't love Krishna and Jesus and the great saints more than he loves even those among us who have sinned most greatly, because we are all his children. But of course, when we reject the power of the light that the divine is putting into us, we suffer. And in our suffering, we often strike back. And so people get very misguided as to where their happiness is coming from. And if they have also developed power along the way, they can assert their misguided understanding with a tremendous amount of force. But what they are doing from the cosmic point of view is they're having the experiences they need in order to learn the lessons that they have to learn about how to find true happiness and avoid suffering. And as they learn those lessons, they're just like anyone else in the world, that Divine Mother gives us the free will to have these experiences. And everybody's karma plays into everybody else's. Evil people are having the opportunity to destroy. And light-minded people are having the opportunity to face their fear of the power of evil people. Because it's all divine, and bliss is the only reality. And as long as we're afraid, there's something more we have to learn and experience about the power of God in our lives. And a transition between Kali and Dwapara is a great opportunity for souls that need to destroy things in order to learn whatever it is they have to learn. So Divine Mother lets a bunch of them loose on the planet. And they're going to run around and destroy things. And they won't thrive. That doesn't mean that they'll be arrested or imprisoned or executed. But they won't thrive in the way that really matters, because if you impose suffering, then the obvious karmic balance is that suffering is imposed on you so that you can learn the lesson. Now, of course, that means that when suffering is imposed on anyone, that there's a divine lesson in it. And that's where the law of karma gets really challenging. But you can't have part of it without having all of it. And that is among the many things that happen during a time like this, when a lot of dark entities, dark souls, are given the opportunity to affect society as a whole. Those of us on the side of light get to face a lot of our fears. And in the end, all of this is to the good. In the short run, it can be struggle. It can be challenging. And I'm in it with everyone else. But I don't doubt the divine ultimate resolution of it. At least I haven't yet doubted it. And the more we're challenged, the more we'll see, won't we? So, in their case, they need to learn to respect other points of view from their own, and to learn that they cannot force others to think just the way they themselves think. We, too, must reach that understanding. You can't just impose your view. You can win people to it, perhaps, and if you can't win people to it, you can respond appropriately, which may be to restrain their energy and prevent them from expressing their evil. But that doesn't mean you can persuade them that your decision is the right one. My thought is we should work with those who are in agreement with our ideals, and let God's love take care in His way of those who don't agree. Swamiji has often said that it's just folly he's talked about the United Nations as an example, where we're trying to work cooperatively with regimes that have no interest in working cooperatively with us, that are just out for whatever they can get and are taking advantage of our goodwill, and the thought that we can just sort of keep being nice and have them respond nice is not likely. He said better that those of like mind who really have like values should band together in strength, instead of always trying to convert those who are not going to be converted. That's what he said. It's a lesson we ourselves also have to understand. We're not going to be able to force our values on other people, but we can gather those who share our values. This is advice to world leaders, bear in mind. This is something Swami said for a long time. If and when others see that harmony works, they will decide of their own will to behave likewise. Otherwise, the only way I can make them behave as I think they ought to is to force them to my point of view. If I did that, in what way, essentially, would I be any different from them? Now, Master has talked about a global police force. So it's not as if we never take a stand. But Swamiji is talking about trying to use our willpower to force others to a point of view. Again, it's a subtle point, which I think I've covered enough as I've come through all of this. There's one more answer I didn't see. Intentional communities. I think for the world that communities are the best way of working out questions of how to relate to others, to life, and to God. That's just such a beautiful way to put it. I think that communities are the best way of working out questions of how to relate to each other, to life, and to God. I have lived in community for almost continuously for 50 years. Very small break between Ananda village and the establishment of this community. And quite truthfully, it solves so many of the dilemmas of our age. Loneliness, meaningful work, having friendships, having support in high values, having like-minded spirits around you, getting the benefit of shared spiritual practice, getting feedback from people whose wisdom you can trust, in ideally developing meaningful work together, working out life-work balance, simple living, economy of consumption because of cooperation. It's just, the list is endless. Most of the problems of our age would be solved with intentional, spiritually based communities. And I don't make that statement lightly. Master said it would be the social pattern of the future. And when that future will come, I don't know. Ananda's unique role has been to demonstrate how to form these communities and the enormous benefits of doing so and then living in them. And Swami has made the interesting statement that history will show, he said, that Ananda is one of the most important things going on right now. And that these communities eventually will, as Master said, the idea will spread like wildfire. We're hardly there, but I can see the rays of wisdom and light going forward, and the day will come. And I'm not doing it for that reason. I'm doing it for the fact that it's the most enjoyable and beneficial way to live I could ever imagine. But it pleases me to think we're also laying down a pattern that will be of great benefit to generations yet to come. In large social experiments, people have been coerced to abide by the theories of a few. The best solution is if small groups can work these things out, set a good example, and let others decide whether that example appeals to him. He's talking about politically motivated communal efforts, communism in Russia and in China, in Vietnam, and other places where it has been acted out, where a powerful government just comes in and moves people where it wants them to be and sort of has this theoretical plan about how people ought to live with each other and then forces people to do it, sometimes executing them if they don't cooperate, or starving them or imprisoning them. People don't accept new ideas on that basis. They may give in because they become helpless and frightened. Swami suggests just the opposite. Let the community itself demonstrate the efficacy of the way of life, and gradually people will be drawn. I've mentioned before that because I really started sort of in an alternate way of living path about 1965, which was quite a long time ago now, I've seen extraordinary changes in mainstream society, in addition to all the collapsing things I see. But there's this enormous understanding of things that when I was involved in them in 1965 and after, were just considered completely loony. But now everybody just accepts them as valid. The need, I mean, I use these examples, health foods, natural kinds of medicine, meditation, yoga practice, is spirituality inspired from the East? All of these things were very, very, well, lunatic fringe is my favorite phrase, but they were definitely on the outskirts, and they're not anymore. And nobody legislated it. No government drove in with tractors and forced us to do it. It's that one by one by one, people saw the benefit. and they saw the benefit, and they took it up, and then they influenced others, and consciousness is rising. So the community movement is going to be lifted on the wave of rising consciousness. How soon? I don't know. In our Ananda communities, we have shown that people can live by high ideals, love all, and have communal harmony. That is a useful lesson. Isn't that just so simple? In that way, we may be of practical service to those who feel in harmony with what we've done. You see how lightly Swami states that? We may be of practical service to those who feel in harmony with what we've done. He doesn't, even though he has profound faith in what we're doing, he believes Master's predictions and has divine expectations about the ultimate influence. Nonetheless, perhaps this will be of practical value for those who feel in harmony with it, because that's the only way change will take place. And even though we never try to convert, we don't try to evangelize, we let people know that we're here. We're not an esoteric society. The door is wide open, and we communicate in appropriate ways that everyone is welcome. But we don't chase people, and we don't grab them by the lapels and try to shout into their faces arguments for their changing their lives to look more like ours. We just try to be of some practical value for those who feel in harmony. And that in itself is Swami saying we're working for the good. And if we just keep working for the good, I mean, in the years that I've been involved with Ananda, it's grown from a very isolated, rather primitive rural community to a global movement in a very short period of time. So I've just watched it happening. And depending how long I live, I'll continue to watch it happening for a while, and we'll see how far it goes before I'm called to another plane. All of us will have that experience. Yes, I think that small, intentional, cooperative community are the best answer to today's needs. For one thing, they work. For what he's saying is, it's a practical idea. It actually can be implemented. It's not a pie-in-the-sky kind of theoretical dream. We had the idea, we put our hearts and minds and spirits into it, and look, we have these communities, and they work. For another, they invite imitation rather than demanding it. And this is in keeping with everything else Swami said. I've gone into this question in depth in my book, Hope for a Better World. I don't think in a quick interview that I could express myself at sufficient length to give a clear idea of what I mean. So he recommends to us the book, Hope for a Better World, the subtitle, The Small Communities Solution. And for those of you who are interested, I highly recommend that you take a look at it. He's also written a book called Intentional Communities, How to Start Them and Why. And both of those will take that subject much deeper. Well, ending with cooperative communities is a nice ending for world conditions, because instead of ending with the catastrophes, we're ending with the solution. In the movie Finding Happiness, which is a film that we helped produce about Ananda, at one point Atman, who's the community manager at Ananda Village, makes the simple statement, if everyone in the world lived the way we do in Ananda, we wouldn't have all these problems. We wouldn't have ecological problems, climate problems, war problems, health problems. We just wouldn't have them, because it would gradually put both our planet and ourselves back in harmony. So now, the next section after world conditions, I mean, that was a nice upbeat way for world conditions to end, but those of you who've been listening to any of the previous episodes, it got a little grim. War, catastrophe, depression. It was a pretty intense thing. So now we're finally out of that section. And the section we come to now is called Suffering and Death. So I had a hand in helping to organize this book, but going through it now, I think perhaps there might have been, we could have given the reader a break. Now, I'm half joking because challenging issues are also exhilarating. And I'm sure that's what I was thinking of. But it is a lot. And I have to say right off the bat that the next section that's coming is also challenging. Fortunately, it's not the end of the book. The book actually ends with, "Seek ye first the kingdom of God." So, before the whole series is over, we'll come to that. So this is a letter that was written about 1974. And the summary of it says, "God will help you if you first try your best." I have no idea to whom this letter was written. "I was happy to hear from you, though sorry for the trials you have been undergoing. Please remember that all suffering is, in the last analysis, self-generated." That's a pretty challenging statement right there. "God doesn't will it on us. It comes as a result of the misuse of our own will, whether recently or in the distant past." I've always been both chilled and amused by a camera crew that decided they were going to investigate the question of whether there was a mind-body connection, whether our thoughts actually influenced our health. So they went into a hospital room where a woman was being treated for cancer, and they asked her whether she thought her thoughts and the way she lived, in other words, her mind, had anything to do with the fact that she had cancer. The woman looked right at the camera and said, "Hell no. Bad enough that I have cancer. I'm not going to take responsibility for it too." And that was sort of, okay, now we know there is no mind-body connection like that. So then Swami says, all suffering in the last analysis is self-generated. It just, when you hear it just on the face of it, you think, what, am I crazy? I wouldn't have brought this, this difficulty for my children, which are breaking my heart, or my unexpected divorce, or the death of the person I loved, or the loss of my job, or this, chronic illness. What do you mean self-generated? It's just like part of you just wants to say, of course I'm not responsible. But of course, if I'm not responsible for the infliction of it, then I must not be responsible for the banishment of it either. I'm just a helpless victim of forces beyond my control that I have no capacity to influence. Well, this is how a lot of people believe. This is how a lot of people live. My driving force as a young person that brought me to Ananda to self-realization before I was 20 was the belief that there had to be principles that guided happiness and banished suffering. I didn't know what they were. I'm sure I was a yogi in past lives. It's simply not possible for me to have come so young, to be so certain, and to have remained so unwaveringly dedicated for so long. This can't possibly be the first lifetime I've lived these teachings. It's not logical. So my drive when I was younger, when I had no context, I was just an ordinary American. Much of my childhood was spent in El Paso, Texas, which especially at that time was not a particularly enlightened place. The idea of self-realization and all of these Eastern teachings to which I have dedicated my life was simply nowhere. But it was in me. And I just knew. And when people would just sort of act as if life was just random, I just knew that was wrong. I didn't know what was right, but I knew that was wrong. And there is a point in our spiritual life where there's this intuitive awakening that no matter what this world looks like, there's a higher and deeper reality on the other side. And we become determined. We might not even be conscious, but we're determined to find it. And that was how I was, which is why I was brought to these teachings very young, relatively speaking. So he says, all suffering in the last analysis is self-generated. God doesn't will it on us. So that's the question of why does God cause us to suffer? Swami says it's not God who causes us to suffer. It's we who make ourselves suffer. It comes as a result of the misuse of your own will, whether recently or in the distant past. He doesn't equivocate, he just makes that as a statement. Suffering can be banished by the right use of will. So there's the promise. We've used our will wrongly in the past. We've made choices that will inevitably lead either in the same incarnation or in a future incarnation. We set in motion patterns of energy that will have to be balanced, and that balancing will require that we suffer because we've used our will and broken divine will to get for ourselves. And so that duality has to be balanced. We have to lose. Now this is the whole law of karma and reincarnation. If you're watching this on my YouTube channel, or you can go to it, Inner Life with Asha, and type into the question box, karma, reincarnation, free will, learning lessons, health, healing, but karma, reincarnation, death, and dying. I trace this all out in much greater detail than is possible here. But one must face into this question and put forth sufficient emotional and mental energy to gain clarity about this, because the law of karma is everything. And the law of karma is wonderfully liberating and terrifying at first, because it says everything happens just as it meant to, and we are participating. It's not being imposed on us. So, suffering can be banished by the right use of will. Then, of course, the big question is, what is the right use of will? But that's the whole spiritual path. That's everything, the art and science of Raja Yoga. It's like how to live with self-realization as the goal in such a way that one will move toward that. As Sri Yukteswar said, forget the past. The vanished lives of all men are dark with many shames. Everything in future will improve if you are making a spiritual effort now. That is a remarkable promise. And when one gets deeper into this path of self-realization, where we're exploring and experimenting with the divine principles of Sanatana Dharma, which is the eternal truth that self-realization is an expression of, we begin to understand that it can all be shifted. And Sri Yukteswar says it doesn't matter what kind of karma you've acquired in the past. It doesn't matter what you've done that is now coming due at this time. Everybody, every living creature, our past lives are filled with errors, but now we know they're errors, and now we're making an effort to correct them. Even if we don't know them in detail, we know that I was using my will wrongly, and now I will use it rightly. So Sri Yukteswar says, everything in future will improve if you're making a spiritual effort now. Tattoo that on your arm, because that's the answer to the whole law of karma, but everything in future will improve because I'm making spiritual effort now. And what happens is, when we begin to cooperate with the divine flow, I call it the divine matching fund. It's like we put in a nickel and Divine Mother puts in a quarter. We do, as soon as we start moving in the right direction, then the flow of grace begins to carry us, and everything becomes different. Don't think in terms of doing this is specific advice to this person. Don't think in terms of doing one thing big enough to lift you out of your present state. And that's sort of what happens. We get into depression, or we get into sadness, and we tend to want to be totally rescued in one giant movement. And what that desire to be rescued often translates into just thinking of some big dramatic gesture. I'm going to leave everything and go live on a deserted island. I'm going to sell all that I own and just go wander in India. Just imagining just some big gesture is really going to change it. He says, don't think in terms of doing one big thing to lift you out of your present state. Think rather in terms of taking one step at a time. The problem with taking one step at a time is it's really boring. And that is a problem. You know, the effort to extricate ourselves from conditions that we may have set in motion a long time ago, it's exceedingly mundane. It's exceedingly dull. To dream of a dramatic gesture is more fun. Instead of think rather in terms of taking one step at a time. Commit yourself to some positive act, however small, and carry that act through to completion. Finish whatever you start. I think he's talking to someone who's collapsed under the pressure of whatever they're going through. He's trying to tell them how success can come. I had an odd experience, which I've shared with some of you, when I did a house repair. I wanted to hang curtains in the house that I'm living in, and there were no curtain rods, and I decided to take it upon myself to hang the curtain rods, which was really a preposterous idea because I'm not good at that sort of thing. But I'm not entirely uncoordinated, and I'm not entirely stupid, so I could figure out, you know, how a curtain rod should go and where the screws had to go and so on. And I had to do about 5 windows, I think. And I managed to get all the curtain rods up, and later I gradually realized how many of them were slanted, but nonetheless they were all there and they didn't fall down, and the curtains held until I got tired of them and took them all down. But what I learned, it was very, very interesting. Because, you know, when you make mistakes in carpentry, there's ways to repair it. When I put the screws in the wrong place and there were holes in the wall, I discovered that there's stuff you put in and you cover the holes and then you repaint it and various like this, and, you know, then you move and then you do it again. And I came to realize that all I had to do was just take one step at a time. Even if this morning's job was to take down what I did yesterday so that I could put it up again correctly, it was still, everything was just one step at a time. And each of those steps was not actually difficult. Where the sense of dismay came in was the realization of how many steps there were. But allowing myself to be dismayed because the number of steps completely confused my mind, because each of those steps was easily within my power to do. And somehow that project was a very important karmic turning point for me. And I developed the understanding that you can accomplish anything with the patient application of willpower. You just patiently keep applying your willpower, and if you don't, quit. You see, most people fail because they quit. It's like somewhere in the middle of it, they just grow tired of all those little boring steps. When I first started writing a book, I've published 4 through Ananda at this point, and I was so confused. The first one, I spent several years, for various reasons, just sort of working in circles before I figured out how to do it, because that was before the curtain rods, and I didn't understand that a book is written one word at a time. And of course, I can write one word. I can write full sentences. I could write paragraphs. But I somehow had the idea that I had to write a book. And I couldn't figure out how to write a book. And finally I figured out that I could write a sentence. And that if I just kept writing sentences, then gradually I had paragraphs, then I had chapters. And each of them wasn't that hard. But I had to just completely back up to exactly what Swami's saying here. Don't think in terms of doing one big thing that will lift you out of your present state. I need to write a book. I'm going to write a book. No, I'm going to look and think about how to take one step at a time. And when I put up the curtain rods, which was soon after, everything followed one after the other. Actually, it's true. I wrote the first book and I put up the curtain rods very soon after that. by the time I wrote Light Bearer, which is really the book that I was born to write, is essentially what I would say, which was the story of my years with Swami Kriyananda. The others were practiced to be able to do it. There was a certain point in writing that book, and it took some time to get there, when I had done enough that somehow the book itself began to tell me what it was supposed to be. However, even at that point, there were a lot of words that were going to have to be written. I mean, the book was 220,000 words by the time I was finished. But I realized, and I was in seclusion for months, over a couple of years doing this, I just realized that all I had to do was do it. If that makes sense? It's just like I just had to do it. It was right there in front of me to do. All I had to do was not quit. I had to just consistently, every day, say, what's the next step, and then take it. And each step was not difficult. What made it seem difficult is when I tried to look at the whole thing and tried to do it in one giant reality. But just step by step, word by word, action by action. But then Swami says, commit yourself to some positive act. Do something, no matter how small, and carry that act through to completion. Finish whatever you start. I think Swami's talking to someone who's in the throes of depression. And we just want to shake off the depression. We want to find the secret. No, our misuse of willpower got us into this mood. Now we have to just take one step at a time in order to fix it. When I've been in very difficult circumstances, which have happened to all of us and have assailed me more than once in my life, I followed exactly this advice. I just try to find one positive thing to do. And, you know, that can be to bake a cake, or wash the dishes, or clean out a closet that has needed cleaning out for a long time. Just something that I can commit to, and maybe washing the dishes is better than cleaning the closet. Maybe just rinsing and stacking the dishes is the best you can do. But when you put your mind to it, finish it. Because we need to convince ourselves that we are capable. Because what happens when we begin to lose our energy, as this person apparently is we begin to think of ourselves as incapable. So we have to recreate a self-definition of being capable. And so if we set a task that's too big and fail at it, not only have we failed at that task, but we have reinforced the idea that I can't do it. But it's not that I can't do anything. It's that I can't do a ridiculously too large challenge for me. And so we have to be very humble. We have to be very humble. We have to say, in my present state, I mean, this is what I'm going to set myself to do today, and I will do it, whatever it is. Just be realistic about what you set. Instead of thinking that I failed, no, you think, no, I just chose the wrong task. Now I'm going to choose the right task. And then you finish that one and you ask yourself, what's next? Just what's next? We can have a big vision out there, but you have to know where your feet are. Because you never get to that big vision except by scooting your little feet forward. So you have to know where they are, and where this one is, and then where to put that one, and then where to put that one, and where to put that one. It's very, very unglamorous, but it works. And that's, you know, sometimes we have to accept that. This is who I am. I'm not very important. I'm not very dramatic, but I can do this. I can do small things. And then you get a different idea of yourself. Oh, look, I can do something. The book that I had to write finally, Light Bearer, I didn't know that I could do it. So I had to write 3 other books first, because I realized, oh, I can just sit down and just keep writing words, and then eventually there's a book. Then I just kind of got that principle. Oh, look, that's how it's done. And then I could take on the big one. But I couldn't have, in fact, I know I couldn't have, because I didn't succeed. I tried to take it on first, it was just too big. I had to take something that was my size. But in the end, the patient application of willpower. When you make the right effort, and then invoke God's power to sustain you in that effort, you will find Him reinforcing you and giving you the strength gradually to win out over all obstacles. Now this is, of course, the most important part. Not, I will reason, I will act. This is Master's prayer. But Lord, guide Thou my reason, will, and activity to the right thing in everything. We're not in this alone. And this is, of course, we are part of a greater reality, and divine grace is just waiting for us. But Swami says here, will give you the power, the strength gradually to win out over all obstacles, but you must make the right effort first. God cannot help you until you yourself first try your best. Now, I have to say this is a specific letter to a specific person, and this is true advice. But he was also advising this person who I gather from this letter was somewhat paralyzed and was, I suspect, waiting to be rescued. Waiting to be rescued is a very, it's a very sneaky mental attitude, and it is one that the devotee has to really work with. Because sometimes you can kind of find a spiritual rationalization and make it sound like something other than it is. There was a time, let me think how I would say this. There was a time in the 30-plus years that I was living here that I grew quite weary of the job, and I grew weary of the atmosphere. I grew weary of it all. And I was really wanting to be somewhere else. And somewhere in the context of all of that, the details are not the most important part. Swamiji and I was living here because I was assigned here by Swami, and I accepted it willingly because it suited me, and most of the time I really enjoyed it. But, you know, I had my period of rebellion or fatigue or whatever it was. And there was a little period of time where Swamiji was talking about transferring me somewhere else, to the East Coast or back to the village or whatever it was. But all the plans to transfer over a course of just several weeks, they all collapsed, at the end of which Swami just said, very straight, I don't think that you're ever going to be transferred from there. I don't think you can think in terms that this is a temporary assignment, then you're going on to something else. Now, in fact, he has suggested other things for me 20 years later. But at that point, that's what he said, also because that's what I needed to hear. And it was very interesting for me to realize how many aspects of my external and internal life I was not putting any energy out to resolve because I expected to be rescued. And so I was just sitting there waiting to be rescued. It varied from, you know, refining the presentation of some of the programs I was doing to not really putting energy to resolving interpersonal disharmonies that there might be. It went down to a closet, you know, that it just was still messed up and I'd never straightened it out. A corner of the garden where I could never make anything grow. It was just like, and there was a large part of my consciousness that was just enjoying the fact that I was going to get to run away from these problems because I thought I would be transferred. I was waiting to be rescued. And of course, Swami telling me, no, you're going to be here for the rest of your life. Oh my gosh, no rescue. So now it's like, what am I waiting for? I mean, I just have to do it. Now, when you add reincarnation into this, which came in, you know, gradually over time, even when you die, you're not actually rescued. That whatever business is still unresolved is still unresolved. And whatever you're trying not to face, you still have to face. Period. Just, I mean, the karmic law is tough. It's very tough. But it's also wildly liberating. Because if I can't escape from it, why am I wasting all this time trying to escape from it? Why not just take a step? Just move. And then God will also help me. But if I don't make any effort and I'm just sitting waiting to be rescued, Divine Mother can't rescue us. Because rescue is for us to expand our awareness, to see the reality from a different angle, to realize that I can do it, that writing a book is just a matter of a lot of words. I got a lot of words. I find out how it's done. I'm not just waiting for some other energy to come in and make it happen for me. So Swami's saying to this person, when you make the right effort and then invoke God's power to sustain you in that effort, you will find Him reinforcing you and giving you the strength gradually to win out over all obstacles. But you must make the right effort first. God cannot help you until you yourself first try your best. If what you're saying to God is, I want you to break all the laws of the universe, I want you to absolve me from this karma without my ever developing the courage or the strength to face it, I just want a free ride. I did things that caused me to develop karmic debts, but I don't want to have to pay them now. I want you just to rescue me. Divine Mother says, I can't. As Master puts it, even God can't break His own laws. And also because it won't bring us what we want. In one context similar, when I was discontent living here, and I wanted to just escape, it crossed my mind that if I turned my back in cowardice on something that God wanted me to do, I wouldn't find happiness by going somewhere else. Now, I have to put the slight caveat on that. Sometimes running away is a good idea. Master said, if you know that you don't have the strength, how did he put it? If you know that you're going to fail a challenging test, he said, if possible, run away. Because you don't want to get a self-concept of a person who is easily defeated. So there are times when changing your circumstance is facing the karma. It's admitting one's weaknesses. It's recognizing that I need help. But there are other times, and that's why I said this is a specific letter to a specific person, but you must make the right effort first. So then the last paragraph here, make the attraction you feel to spiritual people and ideals your main focus in life, not in the sense of wishful thinking, but as your inspiration to do your best to become like that. What he's saying is, you admire spiritual people, you see how they live, don't just envy them, but think about what you can do to bring yourself closer to that vibration. Apparently this person knows inspiring individuals. Well, try to mold your life after theirs. Remember, the same God that sustains the saints is in you and loves you equally. He is our common Father. Isn't that so sweet? What a sweet way to end that. It's our common Father. We're all loved equally by God. No one is loved more, given more treats than you are. Just one foot in front of the other. Okay, now this letter was written in 2001, in May of 2001. And once again, here we are with the law of karma. All suffering begins with self-involvement. I've been so sorry to hear how unwell you've been. You are dear to me, and I want very much not only to hear that you are physically stronger, but in better spirits, spiritually. Please remember Master's words. God doesn't mind your faults. What He minds is your indifference to Him. Forget yourself in love for God. All suffering begins with self-involvement. I'm pretty sure I know who this letter is to. And if it isn't that exact person, the personality is there. This person was very talented and very capable, but really had a tendency to feel abused by life and misunderstood by people, and then to fall into very defeated states of mind. And often that also manifested as physical unwellness. At the same time, Swamiji poured a great deal of energy into this person, because when they weren't in a collapsed state, they were actually wonderfully self-giving. But there was always, behind everything that this person did, there was always the question, what about me? What about me? What's in it for me? Am I being treated in the right way? They had a tremendous capacity to remember every slight that was ever inflicted upon them, because they were always thinking, what about me? Is everybody treating me right? Is everybody noticing me correctly? You didn't respond to me in the way you should have responded to me, and I remember that you've done this to me before. And it was very difficult sometimes, because they were always calculating whether or not they were getting what they were supposed to get. So Swami, using the phrase self-involvement, is trying to encourage this person to just go with their many talents and their many abilities, instead of always, sort of weighing and measuring and deciding that people weren't coming into them in the correct way. Swami says, he puts it in such a sweet way. You are dear to me, and I want very much not only to hear that you are physically stronger, but in better spirits spiritually. Meaning, all I ever hear about you is how much you're suffering. Why are you suffering so much? Let the news be how well you're doing. It was an oblique way of saying it. I want very much to see you well, spiritually above all. Don't hold negative images of the past. Again, very specific. The person held on to, every time their feelings got hurt, every time something didn't go their way, they literally just remembered it all and would sort of list it out to themselves. Sri Yukteswar says, forget the past. And this person, don't hold negative images of the past. The Divine Mother in you could do no wrong, because it would be negative images against others and then enormous self-flagellation. As Swami Shankaracharya said, bad sons there are many, but never a bad mother. He was speaking of the Divine Mother in relation to her human children. So what the point being that Divine Mother is always perfect in her love to us, for us, no matter how we behave. Bad sons, they are many, but there is only a perfect mother. So no matter what we do, no matter how we try to separate ourselves and make ourselves unworthy, she just won't give up on us. She's a perfect mother. And as Sri Yukteswar said, and we have the same quote in this letter, the vanished lives of all men are dark with many shames. Everything in future will improve if you are making a spiritual effort now. I mean, this particular saying of Sri Yukteswar's appears in everybody's diary and everybody's conversation and everybody's letter, because it is the simple answer. Yes, of course, many things have gone wrong. You've been mistreated, you've misbehaved. People have treated you badly and you've treated other people badly. You failed at something you started. Yes, it all happened. Just countless. This is why we have so many millions of lifetimes. We misuse our free will until we have gone deep enough in our desire for happiness that we begin to see another way. And at that point, the vanished lives of all men are dark with many shames. Forget the past. Everything will improve now that you are a disciple, now that you are making a spiritual effort. I think the best thing for you would be to try to give of yourself to others in the community. For starters, allow them to help you. They want to do so. You will be helping them if you let yourself be open to them in that way. It's a very subtle point, isn't it? many people who are good at giving are not very good at receiving, and they don't understand how it fits together. I was saying to someone not too long ago, you love to help people, but you won't let me have the pleasure of helping you. Why are you spoiling my fun? You know how much fun it is to help people. Why don't you let me help you? Because they have in their minds that to give is different than to receive. But I love the way Swami says it. You will be helping them if you let yourself be open to their help. And that just put it in a way that I've been sort of looking for a little while. It's like you let people do you favors, and you show that you respect them. You show that they're important to you. That you show that this is a reciprocal relationship. It's not I whom always have the upper hand and am giving to you. That we share, we go back and forth. Dale Carnegie, in his How to Win Friends and Influence People, which is a book from many decades ago, is a classic. It's a great book. I highly recommend it. You know, it was written from its own era, which I don't know when it was, the 1940s or 50s. I don't think it was much later than that. But it's classic truths, beautifully and charmingly written. But he says, if you want to make a friend of someone, ask him to do you a favor. Because then they have had the pleasure of giving to you. You've had the humility of accepting from them. They feel respected by you. They feel involved in your reality. When we always have our energy closed and never let anyone help us, it's very hard for people to feel that this is a reciprocal relationship. And you demean people when you don't allow them to give. So he says, the best thing for you would be to give of yourself to others. For starters, allow them to help you, because you are actually giving of yourself when you allow people to help you, because you are revealing yourself to them. Instead of just keeping yourself hidden. You're revealing what you need. You're including them in your life. Jyotish tells the story of when he knocked on the door of Swami's house in 1964, I think it was, and just because he wanted to meet a direct disciple of Master, and he had heard about Swami and was given the address, he knocked on the door, and he introduced himself, and Swami says, the first thing Swami said to him was, I'm working on a project, would you like to come in and help? And it was specifically like a mailing or something where they were folding and putting things into envelopes, which is how you communicated in that time. And so it was the first thing Swami said, help me, be part of what I'm doing. You know, join in the flow of energy, which is my reality. That's actually giving of yourself, to let people help you. It's not always the best thing just to give. You have to also allow others to give to you. Jyotish laughs because, you know, some now 55 or more years later, he said when Swami invited him to help with a project, and he said yes, he didn't know it would last the rest of his life, but it has. Perfect. So, but I love that part. You'll be helping them by letting them help you. You'll give them the pleasure of giving, as I was saying, and you'll give them the respect that I need you. You're important to me. Next, and this may be more difficult for you, come out a little bit. Mix with people. We all love you and want your welfare. Forget everything but the fact that we are all children of our one divine mother. Seek her love in their eyes. Feel her love in the energy they want to give you. Don't let self-involvement betray your soul's desire for self-expansion. I'm not 100% sure I know who this letter is to, because there's contradicting elements here, but it doesn't matter. Come out a little bit and be with people. It's so funny how, I will use the word Satan, whenever we feel a little dark, our negativity always convinces us that we should remain alone. But really, it's our negativity wanting to protect itself. Because if we take our somewhat grumpy self out to where there's more positive energy, the grumpiness will be dissipated by the positive energy. So the grumpiness itself it misleads us. It misleads us terribly. Oh, I don't want, this is a very interesting thing I've observed over the years, being the leader of this community and the temple here. People will be very active, and then suddenly they'll just disappear. We won't see them, sometimes not even for years, and sometimes just for months. Maybe even community members they won't show up anywhere. And then when I ask them, either because they've returned or because I go find them wherever they're hiding, and they'll say, oh, I was feeling so negative, I didn't want to put my negativity on other people. And invariably, I want to protect my negativity from the positive flow of energy. It's like the negativity wants to hold you. Satan wants to hold you in a dark place, because there's an opposite way that people behave, which is, I say, well, if you're feeling dark and negative or ashamed because you did something bad, that is the time when you need to drag yourself into the light. Because how are you going to get out of that unless you bring yourself into the light? The very act of bringing yourself where other positive people are and participating in the positive things that are going on, that's how you drive the negativity away. You don't drive it away by holding on to it. People can get drawn away for years. I've seen it. And it'll start with some little thing like that. You can't let those thoughts grow. Swami says here, maybe more difficult, come out, be with people. We all love you. We want your best. Forget everything, meaning whatever it is that you're embarrassed or ashamed about or worried about, but the fact that we are all children of our Divine Mother. Seek her love in their eyes. Feel her love in the energy they want to give you. Don't let self-involvement betray your soul's desire for self-expansion. Very, very powerful. Well, I'll go through perhaps just part of this last one. This was written sometime in 1988, and it says, give all your pains to God. I think this must be written to someone who's quite ill, either mentally or physically. Looks like it's disharmony with others. Swami says, I urge you to give all your pains to God. Don't cling to them, for in that way they only increase and you won't resolve anything. This is a little bit of what I was talking about the letter before. Don't keep lists of everything bad that's ever happened to you. Just let it go. Bad things happen to all of us. What happens between you and others is unimportant compared to your eternal relationship with God. Let every human pain deepen you in the most important reality, your love for God. I mean, this is sometimes why Divine Mother sends us these difficult situations, because I'm not getting what I want from the people in the world around me, and maybe my heart is really broken. So what do I do with that? Swami says, I urge you to give all your pains to God. Take them to your mother, like your skinned knees. The less you think about yourself and your personal needs and give yourself wholly to God, the more you will find Him fulfilling your every desire, and in the most beautiful way imaginable. Remember, He wants only the best for you. Trust in Him. Suffering comes from self-love and self-affirmation. Joy comes from self-forgetfulness in the contemplation of high spiritual realities. Try to live more in God. You have my prayers and blessings. This is, well, it's the same basic thing. You know, there just comes a point on the spiritual path where you realize you just can't keep trying to gather what you want around you from the world around you. And there comes a point where there's too many disappointments. But Swami just says it's a very simple thing that you do. You just realize, oh, this is not, I'm not looking in the right place. It's not that the love and the fulfillment doesn't exist. It's that I'm trying to squeeze it out of these other people. Swami says what happens between you and other people doesn't matter. The only thing that matters is between you and God. And just quietly, deeply, profoundly, in your own heart, Lord, whatever you send me, it's you I love. Whatever you take away from me, it's you I love. All the saints and masters promise us, if we persevere in this way, then everything the heart desires will be given to us. So, God bless you, my friends.